Welcome. Welcome. I'm Alan Goodwin. I'm with the City of Charlotte Department of Planning, Design and Development. And we're here tonight for a virtual information session on a text amendment that we filed. I'll wait a couple of minutes or a few seconds, I should say, to let everybody get settled in and get their technology squared away. And while you're doing that, let me introduce some of the other staff that we have with us tonight from our UDO team. Laura Harmon is our UDO project manager, and I'm also joined by Kevin May and Sandra Montgomery. And I see Nan Peterson from our Land Development Center is here, staff, and I'd also like to recognize Douglas Welton, chair of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Planning Commission, is with us tonight. I think that is all the staff that I see here. So without any further ado, let me share my screen with you. We're going to go through some slides on our topic of the evening, and we'll get going, and then we'll set up how you can engage with us about this topic. So let me share my screen first, and we will get going. Laura, if you can give me a heads up if you can see the screen or say something.
I can see the screen.
You're good, thank you. So we're here to talk about UDO text amendment number 2024-043. It would amend the conservation residential development option in our UDO. So, as I said, we will present some information on this topic. You can use the Zoom chat feature. Hopefully you know how to use that to enter questions or comments in chat. And we will try to keep up with those in live time. But if there are multiple comments and we can't keep up, we will pause at the end, and go back and try to address any questions or comments that we haven't been able to answer in live time. So as I said, the presentation tonight will focus on the contents of the conservation residential text amendment. That's what we're here to talk about. If you're not here to learn about the conservation residential development text amendment, and you've got other comments on other issues, staff can hang around for a few minutes after the presentation and after we've addressed all of the questions and comments on this text amendment, and try to help you with any other questions you may have on other matters. But the presentation is strictly on the text amendment. So with that, we will get started. Before I leave this slide, I'll show this again, but we do have an email box, charlotteudo@charlottenc.gov, that we monitor. If you've got general questions about the UDO, you can send them to that email address. We'll show that email address again at the end of the presentation. Just to give you a little bit of background before we get into the topic, the Charlotte Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, is the primary implementation tool for the adopted policies of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The UDO was adopted by City Council in August of 2022 and became effective in June of 2023. It has been always intended to be a living document, meaning that it can be changed from time to time through text amendments to maintain its relevancy, to clarify intent, address any new concepts or uses or best practices. So that is one of the reasons why we have filed the text amendment for the conservation residential development, and I'll get more into the whys of why we're doing this in a few slides. So before we do, our text amendment is available online. You may have looked at it already, but if you haven't, and you will go there, we'll show you toward the end of the presentation where to go to read this. But how to read a text amendment, if you've not done this before, I just wanted to go over this for you. We do text amendments in kind of a track changes, if you're familiar with that kind of thing, where the text that we're removing or replacing, we will show in red as being struck through. You can see an example of what that looks like in the upper right image. And then new text will be shown as in red as underlined. So you can see what is proposed to be removed from the UDO, and you can see what is what the new text is. And sometimes we will do a whole section if there are significant changes. We'll just strike through a complete section and replace it with a brand new section. In other times, if we're just changing a word or a phrase, we may just strike out the word or phrase, and then you'll see immediately after that the new word or phrase that we're seeking to replace it with. So that's how you look at a text amendment. So before we get into the specifics of the text amendment, I just want to review the vision, some of the policies, the adopted policies and the vision of our comprehensive plan, because as I said, the UDO is an implementation tool designed to implement the policies that were adopted as part of the plan. Specifically, three of the goals would be relevant to our text amendment tonight. Goal 2 is neighborhood diversity and inclusion. Generally speaking, Charlotte will strive to have a diversity of housing options by increasing the presence of middle density housing. Goal 3 is housing access for all. Charlotte will ensure opportunities for residents of all incomes to access affordable housing. And Goal 7, integrated natural and built environments. Charlotte will protect and enhance its surface water quality, tree canopy, and natural areas with a variety of trees, plantings, green infrastructure, green building practices, and open space at different scales throughout the entire community as a component of sustainable city infrastructure that addresses the threat of climate change. Specifically, our conservation residential development option is available in some of our neighborhood 1 zoning districts. So just to clarify what a neighborhood 1 is, and you may be familiar with this already, Charlotte, every parcel of land in Charlotte has been mapped as one of 10 different place types, with neighborhood 1 being our traditional residential neighborhoods. So in the comprehensive plan, neighborhood 1 is envisioned as areas where single-family homes are the primary use, but duplexes, triplexes, quadruplex, and townhouses may also be found. Greater density to be located near a neighborhood center, a community center, or a regional center, or along an arterial with high-frequency transit. So this is our policy map or place type map, if you will. The neighborhood 1 areas are shown in the yellow, and as you can see by the map, they are by far the most prevalent place type. They are the areas, the more traditional residential areas, primarily single family historically. And then you can see some of the other varieties of neighborhood 1 zoning districts. They go all the way from neighborhood 1A to neighborhood 1F, with neighborhood 1A being the least intense of the neighborhood 1 districts and neighborhood 1F being more intense. Currently, if you're developing property in a neighborhood 1 zoning district, you have some options. You can develop it under the base zoning standards, meaning simply the way that the neighborhood 1 zoning districts are written, and just use those to guide your development and tell you, lot sizes, minimum lot width, setbacks, and so forth. Or there are a couple of options available to you. One is the one that we're proposing to amend, and it is the conservation residential development option. That's found in UDO section 4.5A. The other is the voluntary mixed income residential development, and that is in UDO section 4.5B. So today you've got choices. You can develop under the base standards, the conservation residential development, or the mixed income. And this is for new development. This doesn't go back and apply to existing development. This is for new development. However, we're going to be recommending some changes to the UDO. The one we're here to talk about tonight is an updated conservation option. It would amend the conservation residential development. And another one that we're working on, which is a new option, would be a new option, a compact development option. So look for some more information on that coming forward fairly soon. So what is a conservation residential development? It's a concept that's been used in planning for many years. It is where you, as opposed to a traditional subdivision, which might look something like the one on the left, where you've got large yards and each yard is a house, and the open space is primarily in your front and backyards. In a conservation subdivision, you would allow smaller lots, and you would take the open space and put it together for the use of all residents in the neighborhood in some common areas, and conserve more of the site versus a traditional subdivision. Typically, you would probably have a similar amount of lots, the difference being that the lots would be smaller and you would have greater open space for the enjoyment of all residents of that area. In the UDO, as I mentioned, this is an alternative residential development option in the neighborhood 1 zoning districts. It allows for a reduction in the minimum lot size and the setbacks if a certain amount of the development site is reserved as green area, tree save, and common open space. And any residential use that's permitted in that district would be allowed in the conservation residential development. So we've used this, or this has been in place since June of 2023. It's been available, and we are seeing some sketch plans coming in that have frankly, we're concerned about some of the things that we're seeing. So that is the reason that we are proposing the text amendment, specifically the quantity of the tree save and common open space. We don't feel is always adequate as a trade-off for the significant reduction that we're allowing in lot sizes. We've seen some of the green areas placed on private lots instead of in common areas. The quality of the common open space doesn't support necessarily the intent of adding usable open space. And I'll show some examples in a few slides of some of the sketches that we've seen that have raised some concerns with us. These are some of the issues of lots facing onto stormwater facilities or narrow open spaces that don't really provide any quality use for residents. We typically are not seeing a transition area between a new conservation development and surrounding neighborhoods and lots. And then we are seeing an awful lot of alleys that are providing access to lots rather than public streets. And alleys can be a problem, and I'll talk about that in a couple of slides when we look at some of these examples. So, okay, next slide. Here is an example of a sketch plan that we've seen that has come in, and this would propose to use that conservation residential development that we're here to talk about. So some of the issues I'd like to point out here, well, the first one is the alleys. There is, if you can follow my cursor, there is a public street that runs here, but all of these other streets are actually alleys. And the problem, one of the problems with alleys is that they're fairly narrow, and so there is no available on-street parking. They typically don't have a sidewalk, and so there are no pedestrian facilities. There are no street tree requirements along alleys. And so by having alleys in the development rather than streets, you're giving up sidewalks, parking, and street trees. Some of the other issues are the open space, which are the green areas. Some of this open space is very narrow, not usable at all. You can see there's a long piece of open space here with these units on either side facing into it. This one along here in the upper left is a very narrow open space that really serves no purpose. It's broken up and spread out around the neighborhood where it really isn't usable for residents. Other issues are we've got some lots here at the bottom that front out onto a stormwater facility. That is typically not going to be a nice lake. It's probably, when it has water, it's probably going to be kind of a muddy pond, and it may not always have water in it. So that's not really usable open space. So that is one example of some things that we're seeing. Here is another plan that has come in. There is a street that runs over on the right-hand side, but everything in this subdivision is alley. So you've got a long alley here, and you've got one that comes off it to the right. You've got some open space along the edges. But again, no sidewalk network along this alley to serve these residents, no street trees, and they have put a little bit of visitor parking up here, but other than that, no on-street parking. So if you don't live there and have a driveway or a garage, you're going to have a hard time visiting your friends there because you're probably not going to find a place to park your car. And finally, the last one I'll go over, this is another plan that has come in. Some of this open space looks to be pretty good, but for example, along the bottom, you've got no transition area between the sides of these duplex dwellings down here and this neighborhood just to the lower portion of the slide. And along the top, you've got a similar issue. They have put some open space here. Generally, there is a lot of alley. There's these long, thin strips of open space that these units are fronting onto, which really doesn't provide enough open space to feel comfortable. And all of these units are served by alleys with presumably garages and little driveways coming in off the alleys, again, with no sidewalk network, no street trees, and no on-street parking. So those are some of the sketch plans that we have seen that have caused us some concern and led to this proposed text amendment. So what actually is in this text amendment? I'll go through some of the changes and kind of at a high level. You can read it if you're interested. You can go in and actually read the red line and see for yourself exactly what changes are, but I'll cover them at a high level. We're modifying section 4.5A. That's the conservation residential development section. But we are also changing other articles in the UDO, minor changes because of the changes that we're making to 4.5A. And they are in section 2.3, general definitions. We've added a definition there. We've made a couple of minor changes in section 15.2 and 15.4. They're the uses. Section 16.1, we've made a minor change to the lot development restrictions, and section 19.6, the design of surface parking and parking lots. I know that's a lot of in the weeds detail. You can go in and look at those. The changes are minor, and they're basically to support the major changes that we're proposing in section 4.5A, if that makes sense to you. So what are we changing in 4.5A? We're increasing the minimum size of a conservation residential development from currently 2 acres. So you have to have at least a 2-acre parcel to use this option, to 5 acres. So you need at least a 5-acre site to be able to use this. We're increasing the amount of required green area and common open space from 25% of the site to 40% of the site area. That breaks down to 30% of green area and tree save and 10% as common open space. And we are removing the N1D zoning district so that you can use this option in N1A, N1B, or N1C. Previously, you could use it in N1D, and we're taking that we're proposing to take that district off the table. Next, we've added purpose and intent statements. I won't read them all. I'll leave it here. I'll leave the slide here for a couple of minutes and you can read them. But the reason that we're adding them is just to make it more clear what we are trying to accomplish with this development option, so that if you're proposing to use this, you have a better understanding of the kinds of things that we'll be looking for. Okay, I'm going to move on. Another change is a new requirement for a 25-foot landscape yard, or a buffer is what we used to call it, along the perimeter of the conservation residential development to provide some separation from adjacent lots and adjacent neighborhoods. And to clarify that all lots within the site must front either a public street, common open space, or a green area, so that we are no longer going to get lots that front a stormwater facility or an alley or something like that. The text amendment would establish setback requirements for garages that are serviced off of an alley. Also, in alleys where lots on at least one side of the alley front a public street, those alleys are not limited in length. However, if lots on both sides front common open space rather than a public street, the alley that services those lots would be limited to 150 feet in length. So this is an attempt to cut down on the network of long alleys that we've been seeing. And also to create a requirement for visitor parking, because typically these lots would have perhaps garages and driveways, but not much additional space aside from the on-street parking space that may be created for visitor parking. And so we are introducing a requirement for visitor parking areas, small visitor parking lots that would serve the general neighborhood. And we would require one visitor parking space for every 4 residential units in the development. Currently, we have a minimum dimension for the common open space of 30 feet. We're proposing to increase that to 50 feet in all directions so that we get larger open spaces, more usable. Also establishing some design requirements and locational requirements for that common open space. And we're introducing tree planting requirements for lots fronting on common open space, which we currently do not have. And so if you have a lot that fronts on a street in a traditional subdivision, there will be a requirement for street trees along the street. However, if your lot fronts common open space, which it might be allowed to do in this development option, we currently have no tree planting requirement, and so we would be losing that. And so we are going to introduce a tree planting requirement that would treat those lots fronting common open space as if they were fronting a street, and would impose the same planting requirement. The same number of trees would be required. So we've hired a consultant, a designer, to take a look at a couple of the sketch plans that we've gotten and to see how they might be improved using the proposed new standards of the text amendment and what the impacts of this text amendment might be. So we've got an example here. This is a 16.7 acre site. This is an actual sketch plan that has come into us on the left. The zoning is N1A. This sketch plan uses the conservation residential development. It proposes 122 units. 44 of those units would be in duplexes and 78 in triplexes. It's not bad, but it is lacking in some areas. It does have some alleys. It does have some units that front onto stormwater ponds, that blue pond here. It does not have any transition areas along the edges to kind of buffer it from adjacent neighborhoods. So we gave this site plan to our consultant to see what they could do with it. And that's the example on the right. They have introduced public streets rather than the alleys. And so we know that we're getting street trees, sidewalks, and on-street parking on all of the transportation network in that subdivision. We have increased the usable green area and common open space, and we've added those buffers, those landscape buffers along the perimeter of the site to provide some separation from adjacent lots. This example yields 84 units. It's down from the 122 on the left. They are all in duplex dwellings. Does not have any triplex in this concept. The next one is a 38.6 acre site. The site plan, the sketch plan that we've seen on the left, has 203 units. 32 are in duplex buildings and 171 are in triplexes. And some of the issues here are, again, alleys serving these units. It's not shown in green here, but there's a very long, thin common open space area that doesn't really serve much of a purpose. There is no transition along the left-hand side between these units and the adjacent neighborhood, which looks like it is probably a single-family neighborhood. We've got, again, an abundant use of alleys. The option on the right shows yields 171 units. They are all in duplexes. The common open space is a little more centrally located, and it's got some design elements that provide for a little better use. We've also got a couple of other common open space areas around the site. We've got our green area and tree save at the bottom, similar to what the original plan has, although that has increased slightly in area. And again, we've got public streets. We do have a few alleys, but we've got primarily public streets serving these units, meaning that we will be getting the street trees and the on-street parking and the sidewalks. Our alleys are either limited in length, or if you look at the one on the left where my cursor is going, this is over 150 feet long, but it serves these units that front a public street. So as long as we've got frontage on a public street, we're not that concerned with this alley. It's primarily to provide parking access to the garages that open up to the rear. But we've got the lots fronting on a public street, meaning we've got sidewalks out front and our street trees. So this is our timeline for this text amendment. We filed it on March 25th. We rolled this out to our UDO advisory committee at their March 7th and March 28th meetings to get their feedback. We are currently in the second of our two public virtual information sessions. We had one a week ago today at noontime, and this one occurring now. There will be a public hearing Monday night at the city council meeting. It's Monday, April 15th. You are welcome to attend. You're welcome to sign up and speak. If there are potential changes to the text amendment based on the feedback that we are receiving, we will use some time in April to make those changes. We will take this text amendment to the zoning committee of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission on April 30th, and we're scheduled to have a city council decision on this text amendment on May 20th. That's the current timeline, subject to change, but this is the one that we're operating with. So as I said at the beginning, you can go to our UDO website and read the text amendment. We've also got a lot of other information on the UDO. If you haven't been to the UDO website, it might be worth taking a look just to learn more about the UDO. You can read the entire UDO. We've got a link here for UDO University if you just want to get some general update. But for what we're talking about tonight, along the top, choose the UDO amendments drop-down menu, and you will be able to go. It will take you to this page. It's going to look like the page on the left. And you can see in this turquoise bar, it says read the proposed text amendment. So if you click on that, you're going to get the complete red line version of the text amendment, and you can download it or read it online. So that concludes the presentation. Here's that email address again that I talked about at the beginning, charlotteudo@charlottennc.gov, and the website, charlotteudo.org. So that concludes the slides. I noticed that we've gotten some comments in chat, but I have not been able to keep up with them. So Laura, I'm going to ask you if you want to go back and talk about some of the comments in chat, anything that we've got to wrap up, if you would.
Yeah, I think we've gotten through most everything. But there are a few at the bottom. So maybe Alan, if you could just walk through the ones that are that we've responded to, and I'll still work on putting answers in writing for the rest of them.
Okay,
if that would work.
Sure. And I brought it over onto the screen so that maybe everybody can see these. So we'll walk through them. Okay, how large was the proposal? Yeah, I see Laura's answered some of these online, so I'm going to skip over. Who's responsible for maintaining the common areas? Typically, it would be an HOA. And yes, we do have standards for arterial roads.
Alan, if I may, this is Kevin. I think we've got those. I think if you could jump down to Janice Ray's question
Okay.
about 631, I think that's where we need help.
Okay. 631. Okay. The lot width on the alternative plan with 38.6 acres. That plan is not dimensioned, so I don't know specifically what the lot width would be, but they would allow, the conservation development option would allow them to reduce that lot, the minimum lot width in N1A by half. And I believe the minimum lot width in N1A, Kevin checked me on this, it's 70 feet. And so under that option, they could theoretically reduce the lot width to half of that. However, if they're putting a triplex on that lot, or if they're proposing to put a side-by-side triplex, they're not going to be able to fit it on a 35-foot wide lot. So I don't know what the lot widths are. James Cole wants to know where we can find the slides after the presentation. We will upload them to the UDO website, and we will we'll let everybody know when they are uploaded. It's going to probably take us 1 or 2 business days to get that done, so they won't be there tonight. Oh, Kevin, thank you. You've already answered that question. Sarah, what's the flexibility to maneuver between N1 zones? If we have an N1A zone and would like to apply N1D standards, would that constitute a rezoning? Yes, it would, because N1A is a different zoning district than N1D. So if you're N1A and you want to go to N1D, that would be a rezoning. Let me take this opportunity, though. I mentioned earlier, if you go back to the beginning of my presentation, to say that we're working on a compact development option that's a little bit different than this conservation development option. And what that would do would be to allow you to develop under the standards of a more intense neighborhood 1 zoning district. So at some point in the future, that type of scenario might be something that the compact development option could address, but currently it would be a rezoning to go from N1A to N1D. Andrew asks, how does this fall into the more affordable diverse goals? Land prices aren't changing, losing 15% of the development area. Well, I would say that we are allowing smaller lot sizes, and we are allowing different housing types that weren't previously allowed. And so we're getting more units than were available previously. It is an option. So we're asking for conservation areas and usable open space in exchange for allowing more lots theoretically, or at least reduced lot sizes. So we're not exactly, you don't have to choose this option. We do have an affordable, voluntary mixed income affordable option as well. If you wanted to provide affordable units, it would also allow you to reduce lot sizes without some of the open space and tree save areas, although there's always going to be tree save requirements with any new development. Jean Fraser, you said, okay, Laura's answered though that comment. Also the next one. Are we caught up with the last comment I see is from Jean at 6:31 p.m. and it looks like Laura has responded to that. So I think maybe we're caught up. A new one just came through from Bailey. Let me read it. It seems like projects that were more in sync with the intent of the conservation standards are being penalized with the quick council vote on May 20th. I understand the pushback against triplexes. Is there any chance that vote gets delayed, given a lot of time and money has been spent creating plans based on the original UDO? To be clear, this text amendment doesn't do anything with triplexes. I know that there's been some discussion and some, some media reports about, some of the council's concerns with triplexes and what may happen with triplexes. This text amendment doesn't touch triplexes. And unless it's changed by another text amendment, currently triplexes would be a permitted use in this conservation development option.
And Alan, if I could jump in here, I'm not sure that we think the reason this is coming forward is we did think that we had some problems with some of the projects that were coming in. Frankly, many of the projects, we're not sure that they were really more in sync with the intent of the conservation standards. However, I know our land development staff is looking at what came in before this was submitted as far as sketch plans or subdivision. Well, they came in for subdivision plans before this was submitted. They would be able to move forward anyway. But to look, maybe, certainly it's always up to councils to whether or not they push the vote back. But if there should be any adjustment on or allowances for projects that were in process, that is being looked at.
Okay, thank you, Laura and Bailey. I see your response. Thomas, has it been announced when the cleanup text amendment number 3 engagement is, back up to that comment, will be scheduled? Laura or Kevin, can you help me with that?
Yeah.
It has not yet been scheduled.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be in the more than likely the very first part of May. I have that right, guys. So we will be updating the filing we will file an updated version of that cleanup text amendment by the 22nd of this month. And then going to hearing in May. So we would have a session or 2 sessions, one at noon and one in the evening early in May.
Thank you, Laura. Kevin has posted in the chat links to the text amendment website, as well as a direct link to the text amendment petition. So if you wanted to click on those in chat, you can bookmark those and go back and read them. A recording of this session will be available on the Charlotte Planning YouTube page in the next 2 to 3 business days, I'm guessing, maybe sooner. And are there any other questions on the text amendment? If not, we can end the session, and if there are questions and comments on other issues that you may have come here to talk about, aside from this text amendment, we can hang around for a few minutes and try to talk about those. And if not, we thank you for coming tonight, and you're free to leave or free to stay. I think for those of you who are staying, who want to chat about other things, we can leave the chat option available, or perhaps if you can, Laura, do we want to just let people unmute and speak?
Sure.
Yeah, so, okay. I see that Sylvia's got her hand raised. So Sylvia, can you unmute and thank you.
I am unmuted. Hey, Alan and Laura, how y'all doing? Quick question. So when I recognize that with the conservation piece that you just talked about, it is going to be for new development only, right? And it has to be 5 acres or more, at least 5 acres, in order for it to be applicable. And so just wanted to say that, if you look at some of the previous area plans, for example, the MMC area plan, conservation districts are used in a different way. So the word conservation is not so much for conserving like smaller lots so that you can have more open space. So the planning staff has used the word conservation or the conservation district term in a different way, much like what other communities across the country had. For example, in Cary, there's a conservation overlay. So it was a district that was a little less intense than a historic overlay district. So I just think that's something that, for ease of understanding for those of us who kind of been talking about conservation districts in another way, that maybe it's something we need to say. I know right now we're using the neighborhood character overlay, much like we used to say conservation overlay district. So I just think that's something that has to be explained because when I thought about conservation, how it really was about conserving the character of existing neighborhoods. So it didn't take a new subdivision to make it happen. It was something that was going to be applied to existing, particularly older or more established neighborhoods who didn't necessarily want to go through the process of the historic overlay. So I just thought that was something that we may want to say at some point in time, particularly for communities that we're thinking about that. Laura, you remember that, right?
Yes, ma'am, I sure do.
Gotcha.
When you first started talking, I'm like, what else? And I'm like, yes. And we were very, we had to make some decisions on terminology, and remember that discussion very well that we had.
Yep.
What do we call different things?
Exactly. Yeah. So, it was like, we knew we couldn't necessarily, some neighborhoods would say can't qualify for historic and didn't necessarily want the intense scrutiny of historic overlay districts. But then we thought, okay, like other communities, Cary and some of the others that were using conservation overlay. So just want to kind of be sure that we are making it clear that this is for new development. This is not the old conservation piece. And that terminology does exist in some of the previous plans that were unanimously adopted by city council. So now we're using neighborhood character overlay for that. I just think we just got to make sure we're clear on that one.
Yes. Good point.
Great. All right. Good session. Thanks. Doesn't necessarily apply to us, but we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks you all.
There's a comment in the chat, or question rather, from Allie. Who does the study on traffic impact? Okay, I see Laura's already on that. So thank you, Laura. Hopefully, Allie, that answers your question. If not, feel free to come off of mute and elaborate on specifically if you've got something more specific in mind. Okay, I
Thank you
see
for
you've made a follow-up comment. Go ahead, Ali.
thank you for putting these sessions together so everybody get a chance at least to talk a little bit. It seems like, I mean, obviously being part of the group that was involved with the 2040 plan, I see a lot of changes are coming in, but a lot of things that when we were working on the plan that it seems like to be ignored, it was trying to at least keep the characters of the neighborhood together. And by developing common areas, small parks, or accessibility for pedestrian and stuff, all of these things is missing. And the only people taking advantage of these are developers by purchasing large lots that they are used to be single families. I mean, we have neighborhood lots are 2-3 acres per homes. You put two of them together, you got 5 acres, and then all of a sudden you change the whole character of the neighborhood by putting, I mean, we have one right now. They're talking about putting 500 units next to where the homes are set up at the 2-3 acres lands, and they just want to be doing something like that. This wasn't protecting, I mean, the character of the neighborhood. I don't see the resemblance of that.
Sure, thank you. I don't know, Laura, do you have any thoughts about that, or anyone else perhaps? Douglas?
I would say get involved in area planning in your area. Our long-range planners are heavily involved in what should be happening and what kind of infrastructure should be in different neighborhoods. And I think that's a good place to plug in.
Alan, I will just jump in this very quickly since you called me out. I encourage everyone who has an opinion about this issue to make sure that you stay on top of any information that's provided by the planning department. If you've got a neighborhood association or something of that nature, please make sure that those folks also are in touch with the changes that are going on around the city and in terms of development. A lot of neighborhoods have formed land use committees, and I find those to be excellent. When I go out and talk to folks around the city, if there's a neighborhood that's got a land use committee, usually those folks are very much on the ball and understand this and are able to help make sure that the message gets through to individual neighbors, because sometimes individual neighbors don't have the time to follow all of these things. If you've got an idea and you want to, I'm sure you can reach out to the planning department. Again, the Charlotte UDO email address that was posted earlier is a good place for you to reach out, ask your question, and folks like Alan and Laura and Kevin are great for explaining things. I call Alan every once in a while with some question because he has an incredible depth of knowledge about what's in the UDO. And whenever I call him, I get the answer that I need. So if you have questions and things about that, please make sure that you give Alan a call, or someone in the department there will get the answer to you. And that's about all I can say. If you have a good idea, run with it and tell us all about it.
Thanks, Douglas. Kevin put a link to the comprehensive plan and community area planning process that's ongoing now for additional information. So again, thank you for that, Kevin. And Ali and anyone else, you may want to click that link in the chat and maybe bookmark that to go there at your convenience and dig into that a little bit more. As I started out saying at the beginning of the presentation, the UDO is the set of regulations that implement the adopted policies. And so the UDO did not create the policies. It is just the regulations that implement the policies that have already been adopted. So a lot of times the issue is really not the UDO that people have a problem with, it's the policy that the UDO is trying to implement. And so the community area planning effort and the comprehensive plan are where these policies originate. And so I would encourage you to dig into those policies and get involved with the community area planning effort that is ongoing, that will eventually come to your part of the city over the next 12 to 24 months. If you need more information, you can click on that link that Kevin put in chat, or you can email with more specific questions, and we'll try to get you in touch with the right people who can help you with that. Don't see any hands raised. So we'll just kind of open the floor. If there are people here who just want to unmute and ask a question or say something, we would be happy to stay for another few minutes. And if not, we'd love to give you some time back. I'm going to take that silence and and the fact that people are leaving the meeting as to why don't we end this? Again, thank you for those of you who are still here. Thank you for attending, and keep an eye out for the recording of this meeting. If you want to go back and look at it again, or tell your neighbor about it, and they can go in and see what this was all about tonight. Look for that on the Charlotte Planning YouTube page in the next few days. Good night. Good night, Al.
Okay.